you better watch out. It was a threat.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, what? Like, so this was my experience of really starting to see the dirty, seedy underbelly of the evangelical machine. You, as a married man in your 40s, are slapping her on the butt, putting her on his lap. Look, there's multiple witnesses that saw Sarah on his lap in his office. They walked in and went, oh, whoa, and walked out. And I saw Sarah go like, look, I own my part.
Yeah.
Like, this is what's crazy is she doesn't owe anybody anything. She's a mother and a wife. And the way that he has this long history of very good, reliable, trustworthy people who all have the same testimony, who say, I tried to confront him, but he twisted me up in a pretzel. He lied to me. He told me half truths, and then he silenced me. Yeah, he's great at publicly debating rabbis and anyone. He is great off the cuff. He's got an amazing memory, and he is a very good manipulative snake. He'll talk half truths, this and that. And once you see it, you go, give me a break. He had actually reached out to me, but he asked if I would remove my social media posts. And this is his problem, is his arrogance. He thinks he is the voice that everyone needs to listen to, and he would actually think he could control thousands of people. And you can go down the list of all of these failed ministers. He would essentially help to restore or cover or hide,
Hmm.
whether it's, Daniel Kalenda or Todd Bentley or this one or that one. He's everywhere you see a scandal, he's involved. He inserted himself into the whole IHOP thing. So he was on all these calls with the AG and the ELT at IHOP. And I heard from a couple of guys, they're just like, oh, he just talks and talks and he loves to hear himself talk and he doesn't listen to anyone. And then he brags about what he's doing and he's doing nothing other than delaying.
Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up and win.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Wake Up and Win podcast. Today, I'm your solo host, Blaise. I've got a special guest today on the show. You guys are really going to enjoy this guest. If you've been following any of the exposure world, specifically in the charismatic world over the last 2 years, you will definitely know this name. Joel Richardson has been a very strong voice in this space and a very strong advocate for many who have been treated harshly and abused in the charismatic space. And so we came across Joel, probably a year and a half ago or so, and Joel was, speaking out on Twitter, and my wife and I were like, and we had just actually found some of Joel's videos regarding just Bible teaching and things like that, and we were listening to some random stuff around the same time, and we went, oh, there's this guy, he's also speaking into this. So we thought it was really cool following along, and he was one of the largest at the time, one of the most vocal, like, charismatic teachers or people that was a charismatic and also had a large platform and was willing to use their voice to speak into the Mike Bickle scenario on behalf of the victims, which I just thought was really powerful and we became very thankful for his voice. So over the last year and a half, I've gotten to know Joel a little bit. Guys, welcome to the show, Joel Richardson. Joel, it's been really cool watching, I don't know if I ever told you that, but my wife and I actually found some videos literally right before the IHOP scandal broke, and I had never met you. I had heard you speak, I think, years before, maybe when I was at IHOP or something, and I might have even read one of your old books. I don't remember, maybe in like 2008 or 9, but I knew your name. And then we found some videos about eschatology, and my wife was watching. She was like, oh, this guy's really interesting. And right around that time, the Bickl scandal broke, and suddenly we saw your name come across our feed on X, and we were like, this guy it has a, I hate to say Christian famous, but I mean, semi-Christian famous name, and you also began to speak strongly in a way that no one was really doing at the time as far as with your level of being known. And so that just brought a lot of immediate respect for us toward you. And then as we saw you break things down, we went, this guy's not only just speaking into it, but he's also meeting behind the scenes with, for me, it was Stuart Greaves. You were meeting with Stuart Greaves, you were meeting with Dave Sliker. Those were the two guys that had really come at me in 2013 with some different things. And so it really hit home watching you, the way that you handled all that stuff. Can you give us prior to that situation, had you run into this type of stuff, dealt with this type of stuff, spoken strongly into this type of stuff, or was that kind of the first thing as far as like clergy abuse and things like that?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me on, Blaise. I just want to say how much I have mutually appreciated you and Christina the past year and a half. for lending your voices to all this, and particularly for giving platforms to a lot of the victims and some of the different women and women and men that would otherwise have been probably nervous to do a podcast. Just your presence together as a couple is is very inviting, and so I just greatly appreciate all that you guys have done. I know you've put a lot into it, and you can't step into this mess without being affected by it. So it's incredibly appreciated. So my background with all of this stuff, well, one, I'll say that I was the chairman of the board of Frontier Alliance International. And so the founder and director of that organization had an abusive relationship with a woman. You're talking 2012, 2013, so quite some time ago. I joined the organization some years later, but when that had happened, it had sort of come out. It was sort of dealt with publicly, but also not quite. They had sort of announced it from his home sending church, and he was a real much smaller ministry at the time. But so there were some of his leaders that were really upset with him and wanted it to be a very public thing and wanted him to resign permanently. But what had actually happened was Mike Bickle had sort of stepped in and assumed sort of the responsibility over his restoration process. And so so a little bit more backstory. I moved out to Kansas City in 1993 to go to their Bible school. It was called the Grace Training Center before IHOP started, and met my wife. So I was supposed to be here 2 years. I've been here 30 some odd years now. And so I've been out here. I've been around. I've never been part of IHOP officially. I think there was about a year where my wife and I did go to Forerunner, as a church. But actually, and I don't know if you know this, there was a few years early on where we actually went to New Day. And I know you went to New Day with Lloyd Rendels for some time.
I actually got ordained at New Day, which is crazy, by Lloyd. After my fallout with IHOP, I spent about a year there. And so, yeah, Lloyd was a great guy, a great friend of mine at that time, for sure.
Yeah. He actually married Amy and I.
Oh, no way.
So she had been in Master's Commission, which they had overseen this discipleship program. Okay. So been here about 32 years, been around IHOP. So I had enough discernment to kind of keep my family away from the swirl in the center of IHOP. I'll just say that I had enough discernment. I always thought Mike was a great guy, man of integrity, but I thought he was a bad pastor. That was kind of my assessment from a distance. And I thought his leadership style was a bit too chaotic, topsy-turvy. So, we always just preferred small churches, little community churches like New Day, and this type of thing. But I still had tremendous respect for him. So because Mike had sort of, restored Dalton, that, I always just went with that. As I said a few times, these were years where I think as a younger, upcoming, just, author, itinerant minister, in many ways, I outsourced my discernment. I outsourced my convictions to men that I viewed as much more authoritative than myself, more seasoned, more experienced, more godly, people like Mike Bickle. So then when there were some that had been part of the ministry were calling for third-party investigation, I actually had a history with Julie Roys because I had been on her radio program back before she was, Julie Roys doing what she's doing now. She used to have a radio program with Moody, and it was called Up for Debate. So I'd been on a radio program a couple times. So we had a kind of a friendly relationship. And then she got caught up in all these scandals. So as Julie was reaching out to our organization saying, like, you guys need to call for a third-party investigation, I had just joined the board. This whole concept, this was all new to me. You're talking like 2019.
Yeah.
And, we had to assess as a board. We go, okay, like, are we going to put down $40,000 of donor money because someone's over here saying we should? And we prayed, and we believe, we sought the Lord, and we all came together, and we felt like, no, this was publicly dealt with at the time. We're not going to do this. And so I I stood by that, but there was also mixed feelings, let's just
Sure.
say. So the reason I'm telling you all this is because I understand what it's like to be in the position of someone like a Sliker or a Stuart Greaves, who
Hmm.
are, sort of in these positions where of decision making, where there's pressure on you, and you're not sure if your job is to kind of protect the organization or just to, go transparent. So I've been where they are. That's why I kind of tell that I've been around the world of people demanding third-party investigations and praying and then saying, no, we don't think this is the best approach, and we had all of these same excuses,
Hmm.
well, Matthew 18, this is not the proper biblical way, this is not the proper biblical process, and
Mm.
all of these excuses that I believed at the time. I really thought, no, this is biblical, this is right. But the reality is, in retrospect, there's a certain point where I just said, this is BS. It's just excuses. And this is human nature. What we all do is we try to find the most legitimate, the most biblical. When we're trying to find an excuse, we try to find validation. And, it takes a real introspective heart to sort of acknowledge that and say, I was wrong. Like the decisions that I made back then were wrong. And it's always easy in hindsight. But so anyway, I had a friendly relationship with IHOP. In fact, I was actually speaking at a couple of these special monthly events called School of the Messengers with Dave and Stuart and Mike. So I
Hmm.
can't remember the exact months, but I had spoken there a month or so prior to the scandals breaking out, and then I was speaking again, literally as everything was breaking. I actually spoke at the event. I believe it was a Thursday or Friday night. I can't remember. And then the next night was Mike's final, last Black Horse sermon that was
Wow.
actually part of the School of the Messengers. So, I can go back now and look at the flyer that has Mike Bickle, Stuart Greaves, Dave Sliker, Joel Richardson. We were the four sort of keynote speakers. And then also, let me just back up. Another ministry that I was part of that year, so that was 2023. That year, this guy who's an underground church planter in Iran, we had found out, and I was not even on the board anymore, but I'd sort of had residual spiritual influence in the organization. We had found out that he had been cheating on his wife for a few years. He confessed, but he confessed to a couple people but he didn't want everyone else to know. And we were like, we have to tell everyone. This is actually just the responsible thing to do. And actually, I'll tell this story because I've hinted at this on other interviews, but I'll just say it. We immediately got a letter from a friend of his who works with John Bevere's lawyer,
Hmm.
and she sent us a threatening letter that literally, I'm paraphrasing from memory, but it said, Pastor X doesn't have anything left to lose. You all do. You have families. You have homes. You have property. You have ministries. Why would you risk all of these things just so you can shame your friend? Just put this away, put this to side, because otherwise all your dirt's going to come out in depositions. And it was literally threatening to destroy our lives if we
Jeez.
simply sent out a simple statement that said Pastor X had a moral failure. A simple statement that said he had a moral failure. We were being threatened that they were going to take our homes and destroy our lives. So this was and I was like, this is John. This was not John Bevere's lawyer. She worked with John Bevere's lawyer, and she was saying, like, if you guys don't back off, we're going to come at you with. We were told, this is like one of the hottest, best lawyers in the evangelical world. This is John Bevere's lawyer. Like, you better watch out. It was a threat, and
Yeah.
I was like, wait, what? Like, so this was my experience of really starting to see the dirty, seedy underbelly of the evangelical machine.
Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by Wake Up and Win Insurance. We help clients all over the nation with their term life, whole life, or universal life insurance, and we're definitely happy to help you with a consultation.
Check the description below for more info.
And I was just like, because I was on a Zoom call and I'm looking at one of the other board members who's just a potato farmer from Idaho, who had been happily serving on this ministry because he's excited about the underground church and Iran. And all of a sudden he's on this Zoom call going, wait a minute, I could lose my farm, like over this. I've been trying to serve this guy, getting no pay. It's volunteer, and he's
Jeez.
threatening to take away my farm if I do what he hired me to do. You know what I'm saying? Which is
Hold them
maintain
accountable. Maintain the
the
accountability of
integrity.
the, yeah. Jeez.
And this was the beginning of my wake up, uh, season. And so then, then there was two other very large ministries. The Church of the Highlands, one of the individuals there was sort of going around the board's back and still talking to and sort of supporting Pastor X, and also an individual from Gateway at the time. And so here were two of the largest churches ministries in the country that we're going, guys, like this guy is not in submission to any pastoral covering. He's just doing his own thing. He's in rebellion. He's threatening the board, and you guys are supporting him, and you're throwing us under the bus. So I just started seeing the dynamics. This was my first experience of seeing the patterns from the inside. And so when everything broke with IHOP, I at first I thought, well, okay, Mike Bickle's human. It sounds like he's had a few mistakes with some ladies. That was kind of like he's not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought now that he's caught, Mike is a man of integrity. He's going to come out and he is going to put on a clinic. He is going to show us how David repents. He's going to be a man. That was my thought.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, but if he takes the same position as Pastor X, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a living nightmare. Like, I was like, if this same pattern plays out and everyone rallies around the hot shot, and if he digs his heels in and if he denies it, which he basically did,
Yeah.
you can come out and give this little mea culpa, this little, some of my sins, I made mistakes. And he did that.
Yeah.
I was like, he is going to destroy lives. He is going to destroy families. He's going to tear this ministry apart. And people like Stewart, people like Dave Sliker, all of his second tier leaders, all of his servants, he's going to destroy their lives. And all the sheep, all the people. And I just basically, I talked to my wife and made sure she was on the same page, and she was wholeheartedly, and thank God for that. But I threw myself in. I said, I have an obligation, as you said, like from my perspective, a little bit of Christian, minor Christian celebrity. I've always thought that whole concept was just stupid. I'll be honest with you. You write a few books. Look, I never forget, Blaise. I try to never forget. I'm 53. I got saved at 19. When the Lord found me, Paul says, like, beloved, like, don't forget who you were when the Lord found you. Most of you were not much.
Mm-hmm.
But the Lord chose the weak and the foolish things of this world. And I never forget, I was a stupid, pathetic loser living in my divorced mother's basement, thinking I was cool, selling weed. Like that's who I
Mm-hmm.
was when he found me. So I've written a few books. The Lord's given me a platform. Speak at the big conferences. They clap and cheer. Let's welcome the man of God. And I'm like, they're clapping for me. My wife's home dealing with the kids. Like she's the one that they should be clapping for. I'm just a yahoo that's getting up here. I've just always seen the whole thing as really kind of absurd. And so, platform. I just said,
Yeah.
like, who cares? Like, I have an obligation now. I have to use my voice and my platform to try to warn as many people as possible to, put up a flare. And
Mm.
so that was what I did, and that was the first post, kind of the shot heard around the world, where I said, like, Mike Bickle is a wolf in sheep's clothing. He is unqualified for ministry permanently, and I will die on this hill. And it was a scary thing for sure, but I had enough anger, adrenaline, and resolve that I knew that I had to at least do that much.
And evidence, I mean, there was enough to see. And I think that's for most of us that, like, the loudest voices at the beginning are often, especially when you do have a lot to lose, the loudest voices, it's like you were behind the scenes. You had these conversations. You had watched this unfold. And so there was a reason that you were coming out. And I knew that because I don't remember your full tweet thread at the very beginning, but I do remember you saying some very strong things. And Christina and I looked at each other and were like, thank God, because even at that time, it's funny. I mean, our platform now is at like 24,000 subs, and people follow us for this content to talk about these things. And of course, we always get lobbed the accusation, oh, you guys just wanted to grow your platform, so therefore you did this. It's like, dude, if people knew what we were doing before, I mean, this was not the direction at all. But regardless, it was just so interesting to watch because we were nobody in the Christian world as far as our voices in the Christian world, and to see somebody that had something to lose, a preacher that had a platform that had, invites and all these things to say, hold on, I'm gonna talk about the minister that's just about 2 decades older than me, the spiritual father, the this, that, and the other, and I'm gonna say it, and I'm gonna say it with conviction and clarity, and I want to, draw the line in the sand. It really was inspiring because we knew that it was true. We knew that as we had seen these things unfold, that it was true. And, I was meditating today just as I was driving to come over here and, because we've been out today, I was meditating on Proverbs 31 and the portion where he says, speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. Judge righteously. And I just can't get it out of my mind that when you as Joel Richardson, you got a platform, you got all these charismatic churches and that align with IHOP and with Mike Bickle that see you and look at you and you go, you know what? I'm going to take this platform and I'm going to give it to who's now spoken out herself, but Deborah, and Tammy Woods. And I'm not saying in the same way that you're like interviewing them on your show. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you're going to use your voice on their behalf because for so many of these folks, we even look at like Sarah Monk with Michael Brown, and Sarah Monk has a Twitter handle. Sarah Monk has a Facebook page, but goodness gracious, Brown has millions and millions, and then he's got Mercy Culture, a mega church who's got millions and millions, and it's like people want to come at podcasters for trying to stand up for these, but it's called the voiceless, and so anyway, I just want to commend you for speaking out as strong as you did because you gave a lot of courage to many people at that time. So take us that next step. Obviously, everything unfolded over the next year, and people kind of put their foot in their mouth as they began to see that Mike Bickle was a predator at levels we had never imagined, and it was very heartbreaking. And now suddenly, I don't know, bring me to the next stage of the process for you, and maybe we can even talk about when you saw Michael Brown get on stage and at IHOPKC. What is your history with Michael Brown? I mean, clearly he's in the Jewish Messianic community. You speak much about those things, so just talk about that if you would.
Yeah, so I have a lot of friends that are fire school graduates and had always just only heard positive things about him. When I was a younger believer, I had read some of his books on answering Jewish objections to Jesus. He's got 4, maybe 5 volumes. And it was, this guy was a scholar, someone that I looked up to. And I really appreciated him because not only was he a scholar, just an ivory tower scholar, but he was someone that got his hands dirty. He didn't mind getting out there in the public, going on TV and debating. That's what I appreciated him for, is that he was not afraid. Mm-hmm. And so I looked up to him. In fact, I actually met with him last year because of the conflict that we got into in his office. And I said, Mike, a year or so ago, I would have said the top 2 people in the world that I looked up to the most were Mike Bickle and you. And wow. Yeah, but I didn't know him personally. I've been on his radio program a few times over the years with some of my books, and we never met personally. We exchanged a few emails, here and there over the years, but I had a lot of close friends that were close to him, and, again, just viewed him as a man of integrity. So when so the backstory with him and IHOP, I was actually in the Netherlands, and I can't remember the full backstory, but he had actually reached out to me. And because we had some texts prior, and I don't even remember what it was with regard to. So he had my, phone number, I had his, and I was in the Netherlands, and he actually texted and asked if I can't remember if he called or texted, but he asked if I would remove my social media posts. And I said to him, now again, I see the dynamic that's playing out. And so as soon as any one of these scandals happens, as soon as it goes public, this is what's so important to understand. There is immediately a whole team that's working behind the scenes to discredit the whistleblowers, to discredit bloggers, anybody that's speaking out, or someone who's on, X using their platform. They're trying to undermine the whistleblowers, the victims. And so it is a race against time to get the proper information that can be released to the public to sort of sway the public opinion, to put pressure on the organization to do the right thing. It's an absolute chess game. And so he comes in and he was like, listen, Joel, he goes, I'm asking you, he kind of does it in this real humble way. I'm just asking you, just take down, it's not helpful right now. And he's saying, listen, if they don't do the right thing now, he said tomorrow, within 24 hours, if they don't hire either Grace or Guideposts as a third-party investigative team, he said, if they don't hire one of those two, he said, I promise you, I will be a far louder trumpet than you can ever be. I've got a much bigger platform, and I will shout from the rooftops, and I will hold them accountable.
Wow.
And I said, okay, all right, I'm going to hold you to that, but I'm not deleting anything. And so that was sort of the beginning of our back and forth. And then he spoke. So this was right around when he was speaking there. And again, he got up and sort of asked everyone to, calm down on social media. And he kept doing that. And by the way, they didn't choose Grace or Guidepost. They said, oh, conflict of interest. And he immediately, not only did he not call them out, he immediately defended them. And so I was going, this guy, okay, he's kind of got excuses, but he's not keeping his word. And I was becoming uncomfortable. And then he just persisted to act like, and this is his problem, is his arrogance. He thinks he is the voice that everyone needs to listen to. And he would actually think he could control thousands of people. And look, wherever there is high control of either your thoughts or actions, anyone who believes they have a right to tell you what you can think or say, they are probably an abuser or very close to it. I don't care what sphere they're in. If they're a pastor, if they're a counselor, if they're, a spouse, if they're an online advocate, if they think it's their job to tell you what you can think and say, then they're very close to abuse. And so I was like, this is ridiculous. He's berating people condescendingly, acting like he's the end all. And finally, I just lost it on social media. And I said, Dr. Brown, you are out of line. You need to sit down. And it was pretty strong. And so he called, and we had some very, very harsh words. To confess, I screamed at him. And I was just like, you're not a man. Like, you are not being a man. You're being a coward. You're
Wow.
everything that you promise, you're going back on. And I think he was a little taken back that I was so strong. But I was just like, once you see the patterns, once you see it, I don't know how to say it, Blaise. Maybe my stuff is a little bit heightened right now. Maybe it's on my nerves are a little bit frayed. But I've just developed a really severe allergy to BS over the past year and a half.
Yeah.
And, when you see it, I'm just like, this is BS. And they're like, yeah, but we don't really say that. And I'm just like, but it's BS, right? Like, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I just got tired of the BS and really screamed at him, really laid into him. And that's when he realized, okay, this guy's not going to put up with my
I can't control Joel. That's what he realized. And, it's so interesting because, we received a cease and desist from Michael Brown's lawyer regarding our coverage on Haiti, which we won't get into on this podcast. Not that we're obeying everything they're saying, but we are. I want to bring up the point here that Michael Brown did the exact same thing to Natalie Lewis that he did to you. and for years he's operated under the same control factor where Natalie Lewis called out an abuser online because it was taking too long for them to actually do anything about this abuser, and she called him out online. And Michael Brown sent her a private Facebook message, which we have a screenshot of, and it says, Natalie, this is going to cause justice to not happen because you're, trying to da-da-da-da. And it's like, just take some time, be patient. That was always his phrase regarding Globe International. It was his phrase at IHOPKC. And I think that's just his MO. Be patient, just wait for this. Don't speak, be silent. And, I think you said it well, is that when someone is trying to control the activities and thoughts of, it is mind-blowing, actually, Joel, to think, because you go from leading Fire School of Ministry and talking to some of these grads, I understand that there was a culture there. Even Ron Cantor said there was a culture of God-likeness when it came to teachers. Ron said, I was very uncomfortable because it was almost like I was this failed missionary, and then I came there and I was a God because I was a teacher, and everybody just was, wow, the man of God, Ron Cantor. And so you can imagine if he was feeling that from the students, that it was developed from the top down, and Michael Brown must have been the main deal, and he could control what everybody thought and did. And then when he is no longer that president of that school, or no longer has that school under him, he thinks he's got the body of Christ under him. He can control, hey, do not speak on social media, do not share this, do not say this. He thinks he can call you, who would be a peer, and say, hey, Joel, please take that social media post down. It's not helpful. Well, we know now that Mike Bickle had abused and that was not going to come out without actually public pressure. That was not going to come out. She was going to carry that to the grave. And so we know that now. But go on, continue. I just had to jump in and say that.
Yeah, no, 100%. Look, in retrospect now that everything's coming out, it is becoming very clear that Michael Brown was like the mafia boss of the charismatic world. The guy, you say that's his MO. It's not just with the Haiti situation. It's not just with IHOP. You can go down the list of all of these failed ministers that he would essentially help to restore or cover or hide, whether it's, Daniel Kalenda or Todd Bentley or this one or that one. He's everywhere you see a scandal, he's involved.
Wow.
And, and so you kind of ask, you go, well, is he just so arrogant that he really thinks that he's helping? Or is he actually trying to sort of, cover and manage the body of Christ? And I think it's a combination of both. I think it's a combination of both. I think, look, and I don't want to uncover anyone, but, he inserted himself into the whole IHOP thing. So he was on all these calls with the AG and the ELT at IHOP. And, I heard from a couple of guys, they're just like, oh, he just talks and talks and he loves to hear himself talk and he doesn't listen to anyone. And then he brags about what he's doing, and he's doing nothing other than delaying and buying time.
Wow.
And that's exactly what I felt and what I discerned.
It's kind of like what you said, Joel. When you see the patterns, you can't unsee the patterns. And so for me, over the years, like seeing things unfold in the last 2 years has been pretty mind-boggling, because now I can look back at so many things and I just can't unsee these patterns. And I'm going, man, but we've got to see it. And I think the body of Christ, listening to like Heather Schott at Mercy Culture with, Jocko Boyens, who I respect his work against anti-human trafficking, but the guy's literally standing there minimizing a man who had sexual assault against one of his staff members, Mike Brown, touching his staff member / student on the butt. It's just mind-blowing the way these guys minimize. And then they lob stones at anybody that has a platform that talks about these things because they're saying we're tearing down the body of Christ. But the reality is that if these things aren't talked about, then we all are looking toward a Michael Brown to help with these things, knowing that he has done these other things in his past. It's like the whole body of Christ, charismatic-wise at least. And I know this got the Reformed has their stuff, SBC has their stuff all across the board, but in our little subculture, we've just had the wool over our eyes, man, and it's coming off. And I've got to say, and I think you would have some things to say to this, but the God told me card, I'll say this, Mike Brown, it's alleged that Mike Brown felt like God told him that the Royce Report article wasn't coming out about him. He had, I think maybe you can confirm if you'd heard that as well, but apparently he had felt like God told him the Royce Report article wasn't coming out, and then it dropped. I think this God told me thing, I do believe God can speak. I actually have no qualms with God leading me privately in my personal life, but I think so much of the God told me card, I'm just going to go ahead and say this, that even Patricia King, and when the allegations about Todd Bentley first came out, Patricia King told the main whistleblower that God showed her that it wasn't true. And then when the evidence came out, she became a big advocate for the whistleblowers and all the people. But initially, God told her it wasn't true. We see the same thing with Joni Lamb. God told her that Pete's innocent. All this, I mean, what do you think about this, man? Like, how does this play into all of this and the way that we view our leaders?
Well, I've always had an aversion to manipulation. I've always just had an allergic reaction to it, and I've seen it. There's parents that use this. There's pastors that use it, ministers. Look, if you're playing Uno, and all of a sudden you get the God told me card. Whoa, I mean, that thing trumps everything. You can just reverse, take back, draw 8, like it's just like everything stops, right? God said. So either you're then put in the position of either saying you don't hear from God, or I'm going to rebel against God. So you either, it forces the person, when you say God told me, it forces the person that you're trying to control, because that's what it is, to either accuse you of being a liar or openly rebel against God. It's ridiculous, and it's again very common. Where the God told me card is played, abuse is not far away. And I've seen it in parenting. I've seen it in so many different things, and I hate it. And again, I believe that God can speak, but when you're dealing with these type of things, there should be kind of a rule. You don't get to say God told me. You get to say, here's the reasons why I think we should do this, and here are the reasons why we shouldn't. You don't just get a freedom to say, forget logic, forget morality, forget everything. God told me, and that just ends discussion. And unfortunately, in the charismatic world, it's just a widespread tool of abuse and control and manipulation.
Well, even at the beginning of their 3.5-hour podcast last night or the night before, Heather Schott said, pause this and pray and ask God, to help you hear what you need to hear. Then another thing that was said too, I believe, is that Mike Brown called them initially when these allegations first came out, called Landon and Heather, and said, I want y'all to pray and ask the Lord if this is true. And it's like, I think if anybody's saying those type of phrases, it's like, really, guys, if allegations come out about Joel and Joel calls me and says, ask God if this is true, I don't think Joel would say that. Joel would say, hey, Blaise, take a look at all the evidence, have the conversations, and also Joel would be the type of guy that just tell the truth. But the same thing, it's like, if I'm telling people, y'all just pray and ask God what he says, it's like, no, take a look at all the evidence. Let's bring everybody out. Let's bring it all out instead of saying, be silent. One of the wildest things I saw initially with Mike Brown was his first quote apology video, his very first video he did, and he said, in the spirit of full transparency, then he goes on to say, I can neither confirm or deny. I will not confirm nor deny the things that happened with Sarah, but the investigation will bring that out. And I'm going, the spirit of full, like what I've learned about Mike Brown by just watching him is that he's really, really good at talking a lot, and he can really, really twist you up in his words. And then a lot of people just end up believing him. And then he adds some tears and crocodile tears. I'm not even saying the tears were fake. I'm not even saying that, but I'm just saying he so minimized what he did to Sarah right there in front of everybody. And I think, and this was my wife's point, she's not here to say it. So I always take her good points and take them as mine, but I'll just say this was my wife's point that she pointed out today. She said, I think what he did with Kim so it was so clearly wrong, and it went both ways in the sense that he felt sexual things from her, and he said sexual things to her, etc. That in his mind, that was the sin, that he won't even admit to everything that truly happened there. He won't even open up about all that. But because that's such a glaring thing in his mind, the Sarah thing is just this whatever. But in little does he know that just because she wasn't acting sexual toward him does not mean that he had the freedom to swat her in a sexual way. And so I don't know, maybe you can speak to this whole butt swatting thing and why he's minimizing and why he just won't say, yes, I sinned. I touched her on the butt and that was a sin.
Because he's a coward. I mean, it's just the bottom line is he is a coward. He has, look, I'll just say this is my opinion. He is an absolute snake. His ability, yeah, he's great at publicly debating rabbis and anyone. He is great off the cuff. He's got an amazing memory, and he is a very good manipulative snake. He'll talk half truths, this and that. And once you see it, you go, give me a break. It's like so transparent. Anyone who is seeing the way that his confession slash not confession slash, the thing that got me so mad at him when he called and he was like, hey, Joel, he sits there and he brags. Like, if you listen to the recording of him with Londa, he's like, I go so low before the Lord. I get so humble. And I'm just so, like, he actually it's like, he's one of the best manipulators of any of these guys so
Give
far.
context for that recording real quick. So this was at the very beginning of an IHOP scandal, and because he was on stage dealing with it, like from the stage, fire school people like Londa started reaching out to him saying, hey, you have your own scandal, FYI. Why are you up there? And then he sent a voice recording to Londa saying this. Is that correct? Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, so there was a period there where I think it was right around where his stuff was really it was emerging that his stuff was going to come out. He basically did a tour where he was calling all kinds of people, reaching out to all sorts of people behind the scenes, leaving messages. He left Londa a message, he left me messages, and they're all the same. He's just like, oh, and he acts like, I'm going to do the right thing. Like, he left me a message. I'm going to be an agent of redemption and healing. Like, think about the perversion of that. He is tearing the body of Christ in half over, like, he actually thinks that he is worthy of destroying the church because he's that important. Like, I'll be honest, Blaise, even if I was falsely accused of something and it was like, I would just be like, forget it. I don't want to damage the body. I'm just going to walk away. Like, because the body's more important than me. If he had one shred of a shepherd's heart, he would resign and step away. He's 70 years old. He has no reason to be out there fighting for his legacy. And it's so transparent. Anyway, so he had left me a message. He left Londa a message. And he promised, first of all, he promised that he would abide by the results of the Firefly report. That was a lie. He didn't. He had left, a whole bunch of different people these messages, and they were basically just efforts to control, efforts to silence, because he knew that I was speaking out. So this was his effort to try to act like, hey, Joel, I'm just reaching out to you as a courtesy to you. You're a man of God. God bless you, brother. Like, it's all of this kind of stuff. But as soon as I said to him, I said, Dr. Brown, this is BS. Because, this was the main point, is when he left me the message, he said, I know it looks bad. They had sent out a statement. He goes, and I know the statement. He goes, I know it's a bad look, Joel, but we didn't think the Julie Roys article was going to come out. So this is the point, is he's saying, because we didn't think the Julie Roys article was going to come out, we sent out this other letter that said it's all a demonic attack, exaggerations, etc., etc. So this is what makes me so mad, is when he thinks he has the upper hand, he goes, this is all a satanic attack. It's lies. It's an exaggeration. And then he turns around and says, oh, I've thoroughly repented. You go, which is it? On one hand, you're denying it and saying it's a satanic attack. And on the other hand, you're saying, hey, leave me alone. I've repented. And this is what he does. He talks out of both sides of his mouth. This is why I say he is a snake and a manipulator. But if someone's not carefully paying attention, because who wants to follow a messy, ugly story like this? Most people don't have
Right.
time to
Right.
carefully read through a 104-page document. They just look at it from a distance and go, I've always liked Dr. Brown. And they just go with their emotions and they go, I don't think this is a big deal. What they
Hmm.
are not seeing are the ways that he goes back and forth, the way that he talks out both sides of his mouth, and the way that he has this long history of very good, reliable, trustworthy people who all have the same testimony, who say, I tried to confront him, but he twisted me up in a pretzel. He lied to me. He told me half truths, and then he silenced me. He
Mm.
sidelined this. And that was where, I just screamed, yelled at him in the messages there. And I said, look, if this was my daughter, like you can play these games and say, oh, it was just this kind of weird father-daughter relate. I'm like, what in the world are you talking about? I said, if this was my daughter, if I sent my daughter to some school, to a Bible school, and you, as a married man in your 40s, are slapping her on the butt, putting her on his lap. Look, there's multiple witnesses that saw Sarah on his lap in his office. They walked in and went, oh, whoa, and walked out. If that was my daughter, I would, as I said, lay him on his lower back. Um,
Yes. Well, and here's the thing too, and I mean, in the 3.5 hour podcast, which will be clipped and be shared, clips will be shared to show him crying and things like that to make sure that people believe what they need to believe. But he said he said that the witnesses that saw Sarah sitting on my lap that say they did are not credible. He said, I don't believe they're credible. That's what he said. And we know some of these witnesses. A couple of the witnesses. I know at least one of the witnesses. And it's just mind blowing to me that, and Christina and I were talking about it today, just going, he admits things as soon as he can't deny them anymore. And it seems that, like this statement right here, for example, in the Firefly report, this is what Jim Holler says, and I'd love you to react to this. He says, it is believed that over the past 25 years, Brown has deliberately deflected questions about allegations of sexual misconduct involving IS number 1 and IS number 2 Sarah. This pattern of deflection appears to be a calculated effort to evade accountability, suppress allegations, and protect his ministry's reputation by maintaining silence and avoiding direct answers. I like the way Holler put that. By maintaining silence and avoiding direct answers, Brown has seemingly sought to shield himself from scrutiny, potentially enabling these stories to remain hidden and preserving his position within the ministry. Can you respond to that?
See, this is the deal, is everyone's watching and they're hearing these stories. They go, wait, he swatted a girl on her butt and you're saying 20 years ago he's disqualified? They go, that's ridiculous. And look, and I want to be very clear, like what happened to Sarah was sexual abuse. If that happened anywhere else in the world, in the professional world, that is by legal definition, that is sexual harassment, sexual abuse. But it's not nearly as severe as, let's say, Mike Bickle or Robert Morris. Okay, so
Sure.
these are not like violent sexual acts, but it's still sexual abuse. But I understand where people go, but that's not something that should disqualify him. His main issue is exactly what you just said. 25 years of half truths, of lying, of evasiveness, of skirting, through and manipulating and controlling. It's his arrogance and it's his pride that in my heart says that you are forever disqualified from any form of Christian leadership because you are a thoroughly dishonest snake. And that's what people don't understand is, yes, what he did with Kim and with Sarah, it's bad. I mean, you know what I'm saying? But if he had truly taken responsibility, really humbled himself, really owned up 20 some odd years ago, he probably would still be in ministry today. But it's because of his arrogance, because he thinks he can control the narrative, because he can manipulate and lie for all these years, and because he's done it with his elders, with his close friends. You're talking, again, I brought this guy's name up in my messages with Dr. Brown. Bob Gladstone has been a close friend and associate of Dr. Brown. He lives there. in Charlotte with Dr. Brown for years. Like the guy is like one of the best people you will ever met. He's one of the men of the highest integrity, and he completely had a falling out with Dr. Brown. This is not, this guy's not credible. Everyone who has a allegation against Dr. Brown, he just says they're not credible. These are people who worked with him closely, who traveled around the world with him for years, who carried his bags, and they're not just some flaky online, critic who just doesn't like. These are people who looked up to him, who
Yes.
saw him as a spiritual father, and who are people of integrity. So this is what people need to understand is this is not just, look, I'm not some self-righteous, Pharisee over here. I'm a meatball. Like to be very clear, um, I don't want to be in this position of calling out people, or being a heresy hunter or that type of thing. But the bottom line is this guy is a snake. Like in the drug dealing world, when I was a drug dealer, I would have said, this guy's a snake. I don't want to do business with him. And here we are in the world that's supposed to be all about truth and integrity, and he's setting himself up as a man of God, and he is a snake. And so people, look, Landon and all of them can gather around and celebrate, give him a confetti party, but as far as I'm concerned, he's just, he's a snake, and I'll die on that hill as well. I don't want to be part of a world. You go, well, you kind of were almost willing to sacrifice your ministry. I think part of me wanted to kill my ministry just because I'm so disgusted with everything that I've seen.
Yeah.
And I know that's, kind of an emotional reaction. I love teaching the Bible, but it's just this world that we're part of. I don't want to be part of a world where someone like Dr. Brown gets a confetti party. Like that's just not a world that I want
Preach,
anything
bro.
to do with.
Preach,
I'm happy
man.
to
Yeah.
suffer in the outer gates, so to speak.
Man, it's like emotion is so what's the word? It's so demonized these days. Like, people can take, oh, look, they're just angry. It's like the Bible actually says, be angry and sin not. The thing that's been missing, whenever you I'll just say you tell your story about, I think you said it was 2022 or 2023, and you had the lawyer that was connected to this missionary, connected to John Bevere's lawyer coming in, and it's like, when we really see, you pull back the curtain in American religion, American Christianity, and the American kind of celebrity Christianity, it's so disgusting that it would have this type of front to it, that there's even these conversations behind the scenes. I mean, heck, when we got the cease and desist from Michael Brown's lawyer, it's like, does this gentleman not realize that there's very viable evidence that points to knowledge of these things? It's not like we're just out here trying to just say, oh, he's bad, we hate him, he's bad. It's like, no, you would think that there would be some acknowledgement, even in, Brown. These guys, if they would just simply say, I kind of dropped the ball on that. It's not that hard. That's what's so mind-blowing to me. I just want to be like, you don't have to like dig your heels in. You can just go, yeah, that looks bad, doesn't it? I admit that looks pretty bad. Well, here's what happened, but I'm very, very sorry for where I dropped the ball. And see, that's like even Bob Gladstone has reached out to the mothers, the Haitian adoptee mothers, and had very open conversations, and they are so welcoming of those conversations. Rather, on the Michael Brown side, he's got lawyers sending demand letters to people that are trying to platform mothers. Of course, they won't send demand letters to the mothers because that would look real, real bad. But anyway, I'm just thinking about the way this thing, the emotion that you carry. You're like, what? I want to destroy my own ministry, blow up my own ministry in the middle of this, just to show that I could care two rips about this whole thing. Which I honestly love it, because I think that it's almost in some senses, if your ministry stays together, which it's going to, it's, I don't want to be all like prophetic or something, but it's the hand of the Lord, because I do believe that it's a righteous call, not to become a heresy hunter, but, we need men that are going to confront evil, preach the gospel. Paul says it to Timothy, preach the word in season and out, exhort, rebuke. Well, where's the rebuking? Where this would be called rebuking, and it would be called rebuking those in leadership. It would be called James chapter 3, verse 1, holding to a higher standard. And I think that's what you're doing. I want to say it's like Jesus flipping the tables, and sometimes it looks unhinged, but man, I feel like everything you've done has been very calculated in the midst of your frustration. So any other things you want to talk about along the lines of this Michael Brown situation while we're still here?
Yeah, look, I'll openly say, I've gotten angry and lost my temper plenty of times, and look, I kind of wear my emotions on my sleeves, but when I look at the times that Jesus lost his temper, I don't know if that's the right word, but where he got really publicly angry, like flipping the tables, then you can see, you get a glimpse into God's heart. God's heart is always for the little ones. Like the other time, one of the other main times when he flat out rebukes his disciples is he goes like, "What are you doing? Bring the little ones to me. You're trying to stop the little, like these are the ones the kingdom belongs to." And so the essence of God's heart, like this is so important. The essence, the focal point of God's heart is always the downtrodden, the broken, the forgotten, the marginalized, the lame, the sick, the little ones. And so whenever you have these situations, you get a very powerful minister. Let's just take Michael Brown. A highly influential man. He's married, he's got the influence, he's got all of that, the platform, and you've got a young girl, Sarah. She's 19, 20, 21 years old. There is clearly a power dynamic there. You get someone like this who he passes it off as this is this father-daughter thing, and she's got a void in her life and she kind of goes along with it. But he whether he'll admit it or not, he messed with her brain. You know what I'm saying? He messed with her mind. And then years later, she kind of wakes up and goes, "Oh, that was actually abuse. That was wrong. This was not my fault. I am not to blame for this." Now, I mean, look, in all of these situations, there's going to be that degree to where they have to go before the Lord. And I saw Sarah go like, "Look, I own my part."
Yeah.
But this is what's crazy is she doesn't owe anybody anything. She's a mother and a wife. She's not trying to be an international platform minister. But she still actually owned her part. Dr. Brown wants to be the platform minister, and he really has not owned his part at all. Anyway, but she comes forward and she, gets the courage. And she, in that story, she's the little one. And the powerful all turn on her. The Landon Schott and the Heather Scotts, or Schatz, however you say it, and all these guys that sat with her, they are sitting there taking shots at Sarah while they are defending the wolf. And it is like, in terms of where God's heart is, it is one of the most evil, disgusting things. And there's going to be hell to pay. I'm like, I'm not a prophet, and I'm not saying the Lord's going to take away your lampstand or whatever. Like, I don't know when justice comes, but there is going to be justice for this. What they're doing is evil. It's not just like a different perspective. Like it is flat out the antithesis of the heart of God and the heart of the gospel. And this is where, look, the last thing in the world I want to be is to become some folk hero in the charismatic world where you're the guy who, told Dr. Brown off. Like, I'm like, I did because I was angry. Now I just want to walk away as much as possible. But like, there needs to be people that will stand up for the sheep.
Yes.
Like, and this is what's driving me crazy. It's also the silence of, I'm going, where are all the messianic leaders? Where is everybody defending Ron Cantor? I don't see it. And it's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting because they're like, well, my friend, he's Dr. Brown. He's the most famous Jewish apologist in the world. I go, I get that. But what's right? Like, are we in this for the gospel or not? Are we in it for Jesus or not? Are we in it for the money or are we in it for Jesus?
Bro. It's almost as though they think that without Brown and his work that Christ couldn't accomplish Christ's goal through other vessels. I mean, it's a serious joke when we look and say, and that's kind of the feel that I felt regarding Michael Brown is that there's this idea that, well, what about all this that he's done? I like God will use. We don't know everybody's journey. I don't understand I don't claim to understand who Michael Brown has been since the 80s. It is not my job to assess the man's heart. I can't do that. All I can do is look at the fruits of his actions. And people say, well, look at all the fruit. That's not the fruit. The fruit is what's in the life. It's not just, because he could say a lot of great things and God could use his words to bless people. The fruit is what's in the life. And that's what gives us, like, we're watching this even the fact that we're having to have this conversation is the fruit of a man's life. And this is part of the fruit of that man's life, and it's concerning. I really think what you said there regarding just the messianic leaders that are not coming to the defense of Ron Cantor because he's not a big enough as name as Dr. Michael Brown. And I'd say for all of those of you, it's the idea of the book of James that says, do you show partiality because somebody comes in wearing a ring and nice clothes, but to this one that's wearing worse clothes, you don't take to the front and say, come sit up here? It's the same idea. Guys, we've got to get this straight. Jesus has zero care at the judgment seat for how big your ministry was, how many people you actually impacted with your ministry, because that's not you that did it. The Lord is going to impact the world with the gospel through people, through the church. At the end of the day, I think that our cowardliness and our fearfulness, I mean, hate to say it, but that's literally one of the things that it says cowards will burn in the lake of fire. I mean, that's one of the, as much as I hate sexual immorality and all the lying, and the cowardliness is actually something that is not a fruit of the Spirit. And, I'm just saying, I think that we need to call the men of God to the front lines to speak the truth. It's not about tearing down. I actually have, like people say, isn't the gospel enough for Dr. Brown too? Isn't the gospel enough for Mike Bickle? Well, I sure as heck hope so. This has nothing to do with whether the gospel's enough. This is about qualifications for leadership and our ability to welcome these types of men into our platforms so that they can influence our wives and our children. And we no longer want to give the next generation the idea that they can slap a butt and still stay in ministry. That's not okay. It's just not okay. So anyway, there's my rant on top of your rant. But Joel, I think, any final words for just kind of where we go from here as the body of Christ, or even just, I don't know if you want to share some things that might be happening that I know you've told me, and you can tell me if you want me to take this out or not. You told me privately that this did affect your ministry in some ways, and but does it look like? I mean, are you still gung ho? Are you still all in? Are you going to become an insurance salesman, like me?
No, I don't think I'm. No, I would never. Death
You would
before
never.
Cubicles. Death before cubicles.
Hey man, I'm a
is
work from
my,
home guy. I'm a work from home
Yeah.
guy.
No, give me a hammer and no, look, I don't believe that I'm supposed to stop teaching or stop ministry. I don't, as I've always said, I don't have anything in my life that's disqualifying. I don't have some big skeletons in my closet. I don't have, if the stuff in my life I try to be pretty transparent about. And I make a lot of mistakes, and I've tried to even be transparent on social media. I'm like, guys, I swear too much. There's been plenty of times in my life where I've drank too much and, different things like that. Not saying, but, but there's not some big, scandal or affair. And I am someone who's in submission to a pastor, a local church. And, if somebody said, hey, man, you need to step aside, I would go, okay. And actually from the very beginning, I talked to my pastor and I said, look, I need a pastor throughout this. And if at any point you say, hey, for whatever reason, step aside, I said, I'm fully in submission. But I want to, by the grace of God, continue to teach. Yes, many of the invitations have dried up, not all, but it's probably 75% less than, what it would be in terms of people inviting me to speak. And that's okay. I like being home for my kids' football games and things like that. But I've been doing other things. I've been doing a lot more tours to the Middle East, which, I always love doing, teaching the Bible on site and bringing people to the Middle East and that sort of thing. And I've got a new book that I've just finished up. So, but, if at any given time the Lord said, hey, become an insurance salesman, then I guess I would go ahead and
I'll
go
pray.
that route.
I'll
But no,
pray for you.
yeah, for me, it would just be, I'd rather just, start framing decks or something.
Yeah, because you
or
actually
painting.
you create some pretty cool art pieces. I've seen that. Is that like a side business, or is that just like a hobby? Or
So when it all, actually, interestingly enough, I had that idea before all these scandals. I actually said, like, I'm going to start an art business because I want to try to get to the place where like 50% of my income at least is just from the work of my hands.
yeah,
And I'm working toward that. But last year I worked on the wood projects a lot. and I think I made about $20,000 for the woodworking. So I can't really make a living off that. Haven't got to the place where it's 50% of my income.
Sure.
But it would be a good. I'm going to keep doing it. I think it'll be a good thing to do when I retire. But yeah, no. Look, right now the bottom line is, if I had to, there's plenty of work out there, and all these guys are terrified of becoming a regular person. Like, maybe you should be a regular person anyway. And then if you have to get a job and become a regular person, it's not like the end of the world.
Yeah.
That's my perspective.
Well, I so appreciate just your down to earth demeanor, your honesty, and all of this stuff. It's just helpful. It's just refreshing. This, like you said, I like what you said. You're like, I don't want to become this folklore story of the guy who told off Michael Brown. And I don't really think that's what people think. Just to encourage you, I just think if I can give you an assessment of what I think, and this is not to puff you up at all, it's actually just to say, I actually think that you're a regular person. That's actually how it feels. And that's the problem. That's the problem, is that every single person is just a regular person. Michael Brown is, yes, he's older in the sense, he's an elder in the sense that he's older. As far as qualifications of an elder, I don't know that he's lived above reproach. It doesn't seem that way. So I don't know personally that I would say, yeah, let's look to him as an elder at this point. It seems that he lied and changed the story many times. So, but my point is to say that I think that even elders, they're just regular people. The prophetic guys, they're actually just regular people. All of us are just regular people. When you take the stand to become a teacher, you will be held to a higher standard and a higher count. Therefore, you need to be even more of a regular person, even more of an open book for people. And so I say all that to say, I do appreciate you. It's very refreshing to go, I feel like Joel's a pretty regular person and an honest guy. And again, that's not to puff you up. That's just to say, I think there's probably a lot more of you out there. They just don't have as big as stages, don't have as big as platforms. Your pastor, Randy Bolander, I love Randy, because he, in my mind, is a regular person. He's adopted all these kids. We went to Kansas City that time, parked next to him. Didn't know it was him, but he's jumping in the big van, the huge van with all the kids. I'm just like, oh, a regular person. This is cool. And I think I think this interview is not to say, Michael Brown, you're so... This interview is to say, be honest. Be sincere, be open, be regular, be a regular person. Don't protect your ministry. This is for the up and coming ministers, the young ones, all, we need a new standard in the body of Christ. And it's not this, oh my gosh, look how holy we are. It's actually just a standard of honesty and transparency and doing the right thing when it matters and having courage to speak out when people aren't doing the right thing. I think that is actually, I think it's powerful. I think it sets a new standard, a new stage. So, Joel, I think unless you got anything else, man, I'll give you the final shot here. But I think I'll wrap up here. Any final words for the audience?
No, I just agree with you. And by the grace of God, the Lord is going to raise up, new leaders, new younger leaders, and they'll look, and that the model that they'll follow hopefully will be something that's more real. And by real, we say humble. That doesn't mean somebody that walks around all passive and contrite. It just means real. Like, they're willing to own their sin and take responsibility and, all these type of things. And by the grace of God, the next generation, it's not going to be all these anointed, leaders, these pseudo apostles and pseudo prophets. It'll just be regular people who actually care about people, who actually want to love people and shepherd them through what is unquestionably, a pretty crazy world out there, and perhaps even the end of this current age.
It's possible, and the only way to find out is to go to joelrichardson.org and download
subscribe
his books, and you will find you'll find out if we're there or not. No, and one final thought there, just on what you said before we got online. Actually, you said something that just made me go, "Yep, this is a good way to wrap it up." It's the normalcy, and also understanding, sadly, that yes, I do think we can turn the tide, we can make a change, we can. But the reality is that evildoers and imposters will go from bad to worse. That is, I believe that's the words of Peter or Paul. I can't remember exactly which scripture that is, but evildoers and imposters. That word, imposters, So it's not to say, let's just be sad about it. It's just to say, but you preach the word, be ready in season and out to exhort, rebuke. And I mean, this is, preach the gospel, correct the church, tear down, destroy, build, plant. That's what we're doing. This is just a part of it, and I think we've leaned heavily on the build and plant. That's why it might seem like a little bit of an overcorrection for the tear down, but we're just dealing with some things that I think many church leaders have not, we've just let things slide. So I think that's what I'd say is kind of an overcorrection right now. And I'm not saying it's over. I'm just saying it's necessary for it to be loud right now, because I want this to become the normal, that we go, no, we're going to hold our leaders accountable from here on. So, all right, Joel, I appreciate you, brother. And I'm sure we could go for an hour or two or more, but thanks so much for hopping on, brother.
Thank you so much, Blaise. I really, again, deeply appreciate all that you and Christina do, and just keep up the good work. And no matter what letters you get, no matter what threats you get, just keep it up. I'm going to
forward them to Joel Richardson.
Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up.